Welcome back to the Packet Lab. Today we're going to take a look at another in the Troubleshooting Toolbox series of lessons. And the tool we're going to look at today is how to clear interface counters on a Cisco device. So at first blush, clearing interface counters may not seem like a great troubleshooting tool, but Cisco devices maintain important counter interface and otherwise. And these counters are essential for troubleshooting. These are going to be the counters that show you errors, the amount of traffic, any drops, what type of protocols are set up, the communication between these protocols ad nauseum. A lot of your troubleshooting is going to be issuing a show command, and probably the most common one you're going to issue is going to be a show interfaces command, and then specify the interface, and then looking at the counters there to see if there's anything amiss. So these counters keep information in a cumulative fashion. Basically, they're going to start counting packets or errors from the time that they become self-aware, really, which is the time that the router or switch or card, module, stack member, whatever the device is that controls them comes up. So when you do a show interfaces command and you take a look at these counters, they're going to date back to the time that this device was last reset. Sometimes it's good to have this cumulative information, but a lot of times when you're troubleshooting, you want stuff that's happened within a specific period of time, and generally a very recent period of time. So if you've got counters that go back a year and it says 8 bazillion errors, you have no way of identifying whether those errors happened the full year ago when this thing first came up, or if they happened within the last few seconds. So in this case, clearing the counters it's basically going to give you a fresh start on this, so that after you clear the counters, any new information in those counters, you're going to know the start time. So if you clear the counters and 10 minutes later you take a look at the interface and you see errors are present, then you know that those errors occurred within the last 10 minutes. So it does become pretty important to be able to clear these counters and basically reset them so you get that blank slate. And the way that you're going to clear counters is you're going to use the privileged exec clear counters command. Now, if you use clear counters and you don't specify which counters, and in the case of this lesson it's going to be specific to interfaces, if you don't specify the interface, it's going to clear all the counters. Well, most of them. There's some that you have to go in and specifically clear, and we'll get to those in different lessons, but it's going to clear the vast majority of the counters on your device, and that's generally not going to be a good thing. This is a big pet peeve of mine where people know how to clear counters, and say the knock, say that there's an issue on R1, they get in, they take a look at it, and they issue the clear counters command. Well, that's going to clear all the counters, not only on the interface that was having the problem. Let's say it was a serial interface, but it's going to clear it on all the other interfaces. So you just wiped out all that cumulative data, which can come in handy when you're troubleshooting. And basically, I got in here, it's dropping an atomic bomb on a mosquito. It gets the job done, but it's pretty much overkill, and it does get to be a pain in the butt, especially when you go back in to troubleshoot and now you don't have that record of the counters prior to clearing, which may contain information that's you need for troubleshooting. So it's a better practice to clear the particular counters that you're looking at. Let's say we have an issue with serial 0/0 and we see errors on there and we suspect that there's errors incrementing. We clear the counters on that interface and then, like I said, go back in 10 minutes, an hour, whatever, and if we see errors, we know the time frame that those errors occurred. They've occurred since the last clearing of that interface. Of course, doing a clear counters accomplishes the same thing, but it also blows away all the cumulative data that was on the other interfaces. So if you have another problem on the gig interface, you've just gone ahead and blown away all that information. So the way that you get it down to just clearing the specific interface, and that's what we're looking at in this lesson, is to use a clear counters and then specify the interface. And Cisco is consistent at being inconsistent. Rather than saying clear counters interface 00/0, you'll use clear counters 00/0. You don't have to use the interface keyword. And I've got a note down here. This is good for day-to-day work in the enterprise. When you do clear a counter, it's usually a good idea to save the output of the show interfaces. In this case, let's say 00/0. You issue show interfaces 00/0. Get that output. I cut and paste that into a text file and I just save it to my desktop, or if I'm working from a ticket, I might save it into the ticket, or save the text file as an attachment to the ticket, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's usually a good idea to do this so that you have that historical information, because as soon as you clear the counters on that interface, you're going to reset all those counters to 0. And a lot of times in troubleshooting, you overlook something the first blush, and then you want to go back and take a look at that and be like, oh, you know what? I checked for errors. I didn't check for output queue drops. And you've cleared the counters, like, oh, Now I don't know if that was showing any output queue drops on that interface, but if you save this, you can go back and say, oh yeah, hey, we did see this. This might be a utilization or QoS issue rather than a circuit issue. So this is just a practice that I like to follow, and I would suggest that you follow it as well, but to each his own. Your mileage may vary. So this is a show interfaces output, and the information you're going to get in here is very, very important. This is probably the command that you will issue the most over your lifetime as a network engineer. I'm pretty sure this is probably the command that I've typed into various Cisco devices the most in my career. So it's show, I've got int here, I didn't type out the whole thing, show interfaces, and you specify the interface, and it's going to give you a ton of information. This is not going to be a lesson on the show interfaces command, but I did just want to show you some of the stuff that you can get here. So in this case, it's a frame relay circuit. We can tell this because of the encapsulation says frame relay, also because we have all this LMI stuff, and this is some of the counters I'm talking about. So here we have LMI inquiry sent, and it looks like we got 104,000 LMI status received, and it's about the same, which is a good thing. LMI up down received, blah blah blah, a bunch of LMI stuff. So we're seeing, oh wow, we've got a bunch of LMI packets going back and forth. And let's skip down here. So this is going to probably be on almost every show interface you get. It's going to show you the 30-second. This can be changed. There is a setting to change this from 30 to 5 or whatever. I think the default is 5 actually. But anyways, we've got this set up to show basically the input rate over 30 seconds. And we're showing not a lot of traffic on here. 10 packets going in, 11 packets going out. Here's some of those counters. And these are those historical counters. So you see that there's been 3 million packets in, and it busted out into bytes. You see the same thing here with, where's my output? Oh, right here. So you can see that we have 4 million output packets busted into bytes, same thing. So we get a call from the site and they say, hey, our internet seems to be sporadic. And this is your WAN router, your WAN connection is a 0/0/0/0 channel 0 interface. So this is the part where you would be like, oh, this is a red flag to me. I'm seeing 206,000 input errors, a bunch of CRCs. I see runts and one giant, which is interesting. So this is actually pointing you in the direction of a problem. So in this case, you want to know when these errors were occurring, because these occurred weeks ago. They're not pertinent to what we're looking at now. So what I want to show you on the show interface command is this is how you can tell when the last time that this interface had its counters cleared. In this case, it's 1 week and 5 days ago. So this information may be pertinent to the problem that we're having right now, and it may not. If this happened a week ago, I really don't care. You know, it's interesting, but it's not the problem at hand. If this happened in the last hour or two, yeah, this is a problem. We're taking errors on this circuit. This would be a prime case where you would clear the counters. Again, I would suggest that you would cut and paste all this into a text file or into the ticket so that you have this information to review later. Like right here, we see total output drops. You know, these errors may be old. These output drops might be brand new. You want to keep all this information in case you have to go back to it. But anywho, I'm getting ahead of myself. What we want to do here is we want to clear the counters. Now, we could clear the counters by just issuing the clear counters command. But like I said, that's going to clear all the counters on your device. What we want to do is we just want to clear the counters on this WAN interface. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So it's going to be a subsection of the clear counters. Clear counters command is to clear the interface counters. You're going to issue clear counters and then specify the interface. And here it's got interface type, interface number, so you can put the space between there. But basically you can just type clear counters S for serial and then run it all together. Anywho, you're going to get this clear show interface counters on this interface confirm. And you can type enter or Y, and that's going to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this thing. If you type anything other than enter or Y, it's going to cancel out of that. So if you don't want to clear the counters, you have cold feet at the last second, you can go ahead and break out of this by just typing N, basically. So after we've cleared the counters on this interface, we can verify this by reissuing the show interfaces serial, in this case 000, blah, 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 this WAN interface. I hate the colon. I mean, that's channel 0. It's just a mouthful. So we'll just call this our serial interface for the purposes of instruction. Anyways, it's going to show you the information that we just saw. I whacked out a bit of this there. What we're looking for here is the last clearing to show interfaces. And now we saw that last time it was, what, 1 week, 5 days. Now it's 19 seconds. So our interfaces did clear. And if we look down here, we could see that now we're down to 122 packets, 138 out. And if you remember back, we had like 3 or 4 million. So it's cleared those counters. So now we can, say with some confidence that anything that happens down here with the errors and the packets input and output has only happened within the last 19 seconds. We don't have to guess what period it happened within the last basically 2 weeks. So here's the command on the interface. Again, we're in privileged exec mode. You're not going to be able to do this if you're not in privileged exec mode, and you're going to issue clear counters, and we're going to invoke the Cisco iOS help with the question mark, hit enter, and depending on the iOS version or the platform that you're on, you'll get different options here. But you can see there's a bunch of different stuff that you can clear the counters on. We looked at the serial interface. You can do it obviously for gig interfaces. If there was fast Ethernet interfaces on here, those would be there. The thing to watch out for is the CR. It doesn't tell you, so if you just hit enter here, you're clearing counters, but that's basically a clear counters all. So it's kind of weird. I wish that Cisco would make that a required keyword is clear counters all, but they've decided that the atomic bomb is the default for the clear counters. All right, so this is just going to be a demonstration. We've kind of gone through this, but we'll run through this real quick. So in this case, R1 on the serial interface, we do see that we have a bunch of errors. We have carrier transitions. We have output drops. So we get a bunch of stuff baking here, but we have not cleared this for 1 week and 5 days. Okay, and I know there's probably some of you going, yeah, you can tell when these happened if you just take a look at the controllers, depending on the platform and iOS version. More importantly, the platform, the controllers may or may not be available. That's a lesson for a different day. And yes, it's true. You could do a show controllers. I believe this is a T1. This is a T1 or E1, doesn't matter. T1 and then 0/0/0 and then hit enter, and it will break it down at actually 15-minute time intervals and tell you what type of errors you're getting. But for the purposes of this lesson, let's just assume that we don't have that available. All right, so we decided we're going to clear the counters on this interface. We issue the clear counters, and then we specify the interface. Again, you don't need the interface keyword. It's going to say, are you sure you want to do this? We're sure. We hit Y for yes, or we can just hit enter. So we go to verify. We do our show interfaces command for this interface, and you can see here, and again, I think we've been through this before, that these counters have cleared. All the information now being shown on this output is going to be information that's happened within the last 19 seconds. So the reason I went through that twice was not just to beat it into your head, but to show you the other aspect here. So we're on R1 and we have cleared the counters on that serial interface. But now if we take a look at the another interface, in this case the gig 0/0, we can see here that we've got a number of packets, blah, blah, blah. But right there, the last clearing of show interfaces counters is 1 week and 5 days ago. So what we've done is we've cleared the counters on a specific interface and we've left the counters on other interfaces alone. Again, this is something that you're probably going to want to practice. It's not always the end of the world that you do when you do this, but especially if you're in like an ISP or something like that where you have multiple customers, you don't want to clear the counters on every single interface. And if you have big routers, core switches are a big one here, don't clear all the counters because it's going to affect any troubleshooting on those other interfaces that may be occurring either concurrently or in the future. So again, it's better to use a scalpel than to swing a chainsaw. So now you know how to look at the interface and determine the last time that the counters were cleared. So we're on R2, we take a look at gig 0/0, we're cooking along here, and then we see last clearing of show interface counters, never. Well, never, what does that mean? Well, it's pretty obvious, they've never been cleared, but say we see a bunch, I've got it clipped out here, sorry. Say that we see a bunch of counters here and there's errors, and we want to, well, when did these errors occur? Well, we don't know what this time period means. It's never. So the way that we find this out, and there's a little bit of differentiation here if you're looking at like a module on a 6500, if you're looking at a card, if you're looking at a stack member in a stack of 3750s, blah, blah, blah. Most of the time, though, you're looking at the device itself and you do a show version and you would take a look at the uptime. So in this case, R2's been up for all of 4 minutes. It was power cycled obviously on May 28th. That's when this never actually occurred. So never means these counters have not been cleared since this device, well, really this interface became self-aware since it came up. So in this case, we don't really need to clear. If we had a bunch of errors here, this is actually good troubleshooting information because even though it says never, we know that there's only been 4 minutes that this thing has been up. So these errors have occurred within the last 4. Now, if we'd have looked at this and it said never, and then we went and did the show version and we saw that it had been up for, 2 years, 6 months, 9 weeks, blah, 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 then those counters probably aren't going to be as pertinent to our current issue as they would be if they're within the last 4 minutes. And then, of course, we would issue our clear counters gig 0/0 command to clear them so that we got fresh counters. And, of course, before we did that, we would save out the current information into a text file or into the ticket. So let's really quickly take a look at this on the CLI. You don't really need to know how the network is set up here. I'll do a show IP in brief. Exclude assigned, and you can see here that we've got 4 interfaces on R1. So if we want to take a look at show interface, it's show interfaces. I will be using show int because I don't like to type out interfaces. F0/0. Here's that show interfaces command, and what we're looking for here specifically is this bit of information. So in this case, like we just learned, the interfaces have not been cleared since, well, in this case, since this router has been reloaded. So here we can see that we have packets in and out. This is a Dynamips. I haven't been throwing a bunch of traffic on here, but you can see here that we do have these historical counters. So if we wanted to figure out how far back these counters go, we would have to issue a show version. And what we're looking for here is the uptime. So these counters actually go back 1 hour and 52 minutes in this case. So let's say that we want to clear the counters. So we're going to clear counters. And if I invoke the help, you can see here you get a lot of different options. If I were to hit enter right now, and well, let's do that over here. Let's pop over to R2. Show IP in brief. All right. Okay, so the same thing here. The interfaces on this router have not been cleared ever. I'm guessing it's going to be the same amount of time. Yeah, about 1 hour and 50, almost 2 hours here. So let's say in this case we want to clear the counters. If we issue clear counters and hit enter, it does tell you it's going to clear them on all interfaces. So we can hit Y or enter. Now if we do a show interface F0/0, we will see here that, oh, right here, the last clearing to show interface counters was 4 seconds ago. Let's back up here. Let's see what interfaces we have on here. The bad thing here is now if I do a show int S0/0, the last clearing was, well, now it's incremented to 22 seconds, but cleared the counters on all of the interfaces on this device, which is not really what I wanted to do. Again, that's that analogy of dropping an atomic bomb on a mosquito. I was just wanting to clear them on the fast Ethernet interface. So let's pop back over to R1, and in this case, we're going to clear the counters on, what did we look at? Yeah, short-term memory. Okay, F0/0. So clear counters, you're going to be tempted to type interface. It will not take it. 0/0. Hit enter, and you can see there's a little bit of difference on the output here. It's going to say clear counters on this interface. Same thing. Let's go ahead and hit Y for yes, and it'll actually log this. Okay, this may or may not be important for auditing, but it will keep a log that you cleared it. And if you're logged in with a username, it's not going to say console. It's going to say by, packetlab or whatever your username is. So keep that in mind when you do clear the counters and the engineer comes back and he's looking at the router and he's like, who the hell cleared all the counters? And you go, I don't know. He could probably look at the log and find out who it was. And in this case, you're clearing the counters on the interface. Let's see if it logged it on R2. Did it do it? Yeah, and there's a difference here. So it's a clear counter on all, clear counters on all interfaces by console. Now, again, we're not logged in with usernames, but this would say something like plab or whatever your username is. So there is a way that you can get caught if you're doing this and invoke the ire of the mean old network engineer. So anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the interface. So interface F0/0. I've been blabbing for a while, so this is going to go, oh, I've been blabbing for 1 minute and 11 seconds. So you can see here that everything's been cleared. All these counters are now describing events that have happened in the last 1 minute and 11 seconds. The cool thing is if we do show int 0/0, we take a look at this guy, it still has that never. So we cleared only F0/0. So we wielded our scalpel rather than our battle axe. I keep mixing up these metaphors. And that's really all there is on the CLI. Like I said, it's just getting used to, rather than using the clear counters command to specifying the interface in this case that you want to clear and leaving the information intact on the other interfaces. So again, this is a good tool to throw in your troubleshooting toolbox. So in summary, Cisco devices maintain important counters. And in this case, we're specifying counters on the interfaces that are essential for troubleshooting. It's going to give you cumulative stats on information such as packets in and out, errors, output drops, all kinds of stuff. So very important information. I don't want to use the term unfortunately, but it is cumulative, so it's going to maintain counters going back to the last time that those counters were reset. Generally, that's going to be reset with a clear counters command, or if the device, card, module, whatever the controlling brains of this interface are, has reset, has reloaded, has power cycle, blah, blah. So anyways, the way to clear this is with the clear counters privileged exec command. Now, the thing that I tried to drive home in this lesson is that clear counters basically equals clear counters all. It's going to clear all the counters on all the interfaces, and 99% of the time you don't want to do that. You want to specify what you're going to clear. So if the problem is with a serial interface, you're going to want to just clear the counters on that serial interface. And when you clear the counters, what it does is it gives you a fresh slate. It's going to say, okay, any information you're seeing now is going to have happened since the time that you reset the counter. So a lot of times what you're going to do in troubleshooting is you'll find an issue and you see errors on the interface, and you want to see if those errors are incrementing. You could just up arrow and do the subtraction, or you could clear it and then check for any errors going forward. Also, after you fix something, say that you've had a problem with your WAN circuit and AT&T has fixed it, and during the process of testing, you're going to see a bunch of errors and stuff. So those you just want to clear out and get your fresh slate going forward. So you clear the interface, and then if you monitor it for a day and there's no errors, then go ahead, close the ticket. Or, and this happens sometimes, AT&T didn't really fix it, and an hour later you look back at it and you're like, well, we're still incrementing errors. So it's a good thing to be able to clear these counters, but it's good to clear the counters for the specific interface so that you don't blow away information that might be important to other troubleshooting on the other interfaces. And the way to do that is with the clear counters interface command, where you specify the interface. So in the case of 00/0, you'd say clear counters 00/0, or rather than just clear counters and enter. One last thing that we did take a look at is when you're looking at the show interfaces output, it will tell you the last time that the counters were cleared. So after you clear the counters, you can go ahead and issue the show interfaces command, specify the interface, and see last clearing of show interface counters, and it should be a few seconds ago after you have issued that command. If you do run across this where you see never, then that means that that interface has not been reset since basically it had enough brains to know that it was in existence, since it became sentient. Generally, that's going to be the uptime of the router or switch, and you can verify that with the show version. It might be a module issue if you're on a 6500 or a modular router. Your mileage may vary, but just keep in mind that that means that it hasn't been cleared since that time. Those counters might be valid to troubleshooting if it's been a short time since your device has been up. We saw that in the examples. Anyways, I think that's going to do it. So a lot of times we don't think of clear counters as a troubleshooting tool, but as we saw in this lesson, it is, and it's actually a fairly important one. Thanks once again for joining me in the Packet Lab. As always, I hope this helps you on your route to becoming a network god.